Hi everyone, it's Tox from critshappen.com. Thanks for watching and welcome back. Well, we are fresh off the heels of Gen Con 2013, and sitting in front of me is probably the, if not one of, the best games that has come out of Gen Con. This is the Pathfinder adventure card game, designed by Mike Selinker, and is designed for 1 to 4 players with a base box, but there is a character add-on deck you can get that will allow you to expand to 6 players as well. This is a card game unlike anything else you have ever seen. Paizo is the publisher, as you may know, of course, they are the publisher of Pathfinder, the role-playing game, and this sits in a very interesting position. The idea of this game is that you can play solo or with friends, and you're going to play characters that you're going to end up leveling over time, just like a role-playing game. There's all different types of classes, there's all different types of abilities. As you can see from all of the cards that are in this base set, there is a massive amount of options. In fact, the base set comes with 500 cards. Then in addition, as time goes on, there's going to be more adventure packs thrown in as well. So almost in the sense of a living card game, this game is going to grow. But more importantly, so are you. The idea behind this game is the experience that you're going to get playing this game. There is quite a lot involved with it, and there's really no easy way to explain everything without just showing you how to play. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some time, set up a scenario, and show you a solo playthrough and what happens turn by turn and action by action as we, as Seela the Paladin, try to take down Black Fang in Black Fang's dungeon. This is dangerous, very dangerous, because when you're fighting dragons, the last thing you want to do is be by yourself. But in this case, we're going to give it a shot. Come with us as we start off on our first scenario in the Pathfinder adventure card game. So we're going to play a scenario. Now, in the Pathfinder adventure card game, there is scenarios, there are adventures, and there are adventure paths. As you can imagine, a scenario is a single session. An adventure is a series of scenarios, and an adventure path is a series of adventures. So you can make a short, medium, long, gigantic game based out of how you want to play. Now, Black Fang's dungeon says that we're going to have Black Fang as the villain, so we're going to go ahead and get Black Fang out of the box. We're also going to have ancient skeletons as the henchmen. Now, how many do we actually go get? Well, let's talk about that. Let's have a couple of them set to the side, and we'll talk a little bit about how we know how to set this up. The first thing you're going to do is on the back of Black Fang's dungeon, it will tell you a little bit about the story and then show you a chart that shows number of players and the locations needed for each. So for us, we're going to play a solo game. So we look at all of the locations that have a 1 next to them, which is the Desecrated Vault, the Temple, and the Shrine of Lamashtu. So we're going to go ahead and get the Temple, the Shrine to Lamashtu, and the Desecrated Vault locations out of our box. Now we have our 3 locations, so we need to have a villain and a henchman equal to the number of locations. So while there only says 1 line of ancient skeletons here, the very bottom henchman is going to be multiplied by the remaining number of locations you have. So in this case, if we have Black Fang and 2 remaining locations, we get 2 ancient skeletons. Now, we put those off to the side because what we're going to have to do now is build our location decks. Let's take a look, for example, at the Temple. The Temple has a deck list, and it has a chart that shows how many of each types of cards make up the location deck for this location. What you do is you go into the box, you pull out randomly, or you shuffle up and deal these total number of cards. So for the Temple, we have no monsters, no barriers, which is good, 2 weapons and 2 spells, no armor, 1 item, and 4 blessings. So this is not too dangerous of a place to go ahead and explore into. However, when you look at the Shrine of Lamashtu and the Desecrated Vault, it gets much more dangerous. The Shrine has 3 monsters and 2 barriers, which are hard to get through, and then 3 blessings and 1 spell. So literally half of this deck is very, very hard to get through. Then we have the Desecrated Vault, and the Desecrated Vault has 4 monsters and 1 barrier, as well as a spell, 2 items, and a blessing. So we're going to go ahead and pull each of those types of cards randomly out of the box. Then we're going to shuffle them up and make a deck for each of these based off of what the cards are needed at each location. Then we're going to randomly shuffle Black Fang and the 2 Ancient Skeletons, place them on top of each of the location decks, and shuffle them into each location deck. That means that Black Fang could be anywhere. He could be in the shrine, he could be in the temple, he could be in the desecrated vault. Now, as we go through the game, our job is going to be to find and defeat Black Fang. However, we're going to have to corner him as well, which means just because we may find him in the very first area we go to search in, doesn't mean he can't escape and go somewhere else. Escaping happens when you don't close locations. And you'll notice on the locations, as we've been showing them to you, they have abilities of what to do when you're closing them, and we'll show you as we go through gameplay when those arise and what you have to do that. That's the setup. Now, as you can imagine, when you look at the back of Black Fang Dungeon card, if you have 6 players, you have quite a lot of locations. You're actually going to have 8 different locations, so the game can be quite lengthy and quite involved. But amazingly, even with something that large, it moves really, really well. Speaking of, let's go ahead, get our character, who in this case is going to be Sela, the human paladin, and she is going to take on Black Fang's dungeon. So let's talk a little bit about our character first. Sela has 3 cards, as all characters do. There's a token card, which is going to be used to represent which location we're currently at. It has a backside with a little bit of a story, and then a front side that represents your character. Now, we also have a main character sheet and then a role sheet. Now, the main character sheet shows us on one side how many cards and what types make up our deck. The leftmost column showing, in this case, 3 weapons, 1 spell, 3 armors, 2 allies, and 6 blessings is what we start with. There are checkboxes to the side of other numbers that as we achieve and succeed at scenarios and adventures and adventure paths, we could potentially add to that. Now, yes, you can check these cards off physically. Yes, you can put them into a clear sleeve and use a dry erase marker. Or even better, you can go to paizo.com and download the character sheets and use those to where you can just use your cards in the game and have your character sheets on the side for in-between games. Because this is not just sit down and play as a paladin once. This is how do we develop and how do we get better. And speaking of, as you get better, the flip side shows us what our skills and our powers are to start the game with. Some of these are already checked because they already start the game, like for instance with Sela, she is proficient with light armor, heavy armor, and weapons. So those are great abilities for a paladin to have. However, as she levels up, she is going to be able to choose a role in later scenarios and later adventures. She has an option of a crusader or a hospitaller. So each one has the hand size, proficient with, and powers that Sela starts with. But then there's a couple of extra lines and extra abilities based on which direction you would want to grow your character. So while our first game here is going to not see us use the role card, as we develop Sela, we're going to have the ability to add that in later games and increase her capabilities and her powers based on our personal play style or what our group and our party may need later on down the road. For now, Sela is going to start with a basic deck. What do I mean by a basic deck? Well, the cards that come in the base set have classifications in the upper right hand corner of all the different types of cards. The B stands for the base deck. The C stands for the character add-on. And then there are numbers 1, 2, 3, and so on for each adventure deck that comes out. So if you have the Rise of the Rune Lords base set, the Burnt Offerings adventure deck, and the character add-on deck, you're going to have a mixture of cards that have a B, a C, and a 1. When you're building your character's deck for the first time, you're only allowed to use cards that have B for basic on them. From there, you're going to expand, you're going to possibly acquire, you're going to encounter and have the opportunity to gain cards that will be more powerful and level up your character's capabilities both throughout the scenarios, adventures, and adventure paths you play, but also in between based on the rewards that the scenarios and the adventures and adventure paths reward the adventurers for succeeding on. Now, in all the characters' cases, you can customize the starting deck however you like based on their character's cards and the quantity or type of amount of cards that they can start with. There's also suggested starter decks in the back of the rule book that's inside of the base set that includes the base set characters and the character add-on deck characters. So for Sela, we're going to start with a longsword, a mace, and a short sword for our weapons. The spell called Cure, which is going to be really helpful, hopefully. We're going to have 2 half-plate cards and a wooden shield as armor. We're going to also be joined by the Night Watch and the Standard Bearer ally. And then we're going to have 6 Blessings of the Gods. That will be our starter deck, and that is the one that is suggested inside of the rulebook. However, again, you can make up your own starting deck using any of the cards that have a B on them, but being limited to the quantities and types of cards that your character card shows that you can start the game with. Okay, we are set up and ready to go with the Pathfinder adventure card game. We're playing as Sela, our paladin. We've drawn our 4 cards based off of the starting hand size listed on her card. And we have set up the location decks for the Temple, the Shrine of Lamashtu, and the Desecrated Vault for our Black Fang's dungeon scenario. At the beginning of the game, you choose a location to start at. We're going to start at the Temple. If we leave the Temple and come back, there's going to be some impact to that as well, because it does say when you move or are moved here, I'm going to have to discard a card. Additionally, if we're at another location, any player at another location can evade an encounter and move here, discarding 2 cards instead of the normal 1, and then resetting his or her hand. So the Temple almost acts as a hearthstone to pull us out, but we could end up discarding cards. Now, the number one thing to know when playing this game, your 15 card deck is your life. This is not a deck building game where we're going to be acquiring new cards and adding to our deck immediately. We will over the course of time, and at the end of the game we're going to be able to use the cards we've encountered to modify our 15 card deck, and as we grow our character we'll be able to add more cards into this. But it is not a deck builder in the sense I've heard some people discuss about it. And I hope that this gameplay session will actually show you a little more about that. So we start off by drawing our 4 cards. And if we ever cannot draw cards when we're told to, we are going to be dead. So a very big part of managing your character is managing this deck. You don't want to overextend yourself, but you don't want to underextend yourself and limit to how you're going to be able to acquire and achieve victory. So the first thing you do on every turn is you take this blessing deck, which we set up originally to show that there were 30 random blessings in here. You flip over the top card of the blessing deck. Now, what this means right now is nothing more than 1 turn has passed and we're at the beginning of this game. You don't try to acquire this card, you don't try to get it in your hand, it just acts as a timer. There will be cards in your hand. For example, the Blessing of the Gods says you may instead treat this card as if it were identical to the top card of the Blessing discard pile. So there's going to be cards in your hand that will interact with the top card, but generally this counts as a timer. If this runs out and we have not defeated Black Fang, we lose the adventure. So already you can tell, you have 30 cards here, 15 cards representing your health and your capabilities and your powers, and we have a lot of cards to go through from a location standpoint to hopefully get to Black Fang and be able to defeat him. So let's get started with our first turn. We've already flipped over the very top card of the blessing deck. The next thing we could do if we were playing a multiplayer game is give a card from our hand to someone else at our location. Now, since this is a solo game, we're not going to be doing that, but it is good to know that that is an option. You can kind of plan with your fellow players in your party. There's some people who like to play this game by splitting up party members and going to different locations. There's some that like to stay together. There's some that, quite frankly, work really well when they are together. So it's a matter of balancing your party and your party's capabilities. The next thing we would do is we could move to another location, but since we want to start at the temple, I think we're going to stay there. The nice thing about the deck list being on the cards for the locations is you can tell how many monsters, how many items, how many things you possibly are going to encounter if you explore inside these decks, which we'll talk about in our next move. So once we've decided to move or not move, we can then explore once for free our current location. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to explore inside the temple. And the first thing we find is the Staff of Minor Healing. This is an item. When you go exploring, you're basically going to find one of two different type of cards. You're going to either find a boon, which is an item or a beneficial armor or weapon or ally, or you're going to find a bane, which is a monster or a villain or a henchman. And both are quite challenging in terms of what you're going to acquire to add to your capabilities or defeat to progress along the path to victory. So this Staff of Minor Healing is really good. It says recharge this card and choose a character at your location to recharge one random card from his discard pile. What does recharging mean? Well, there's a lot of different terms that you're going to see on the cards. Some of the more obvious ones are discard and reveal. Recharging means that you take the card from your hand and you put it on the bottom of your deck. So you don't go to your discard pile, it goes to the bottom of your deck and you could get it back later on. There's also burying and banishing. Burying means that I put it underneath my character card and it's gone for the rest of this scenario. Banishing means that it is back to the box and I'm never going to have it back again unless I acquire it through some other adventure or adventure path or scenario. So right now the Staff of Minor Healing looks really good for us to go ahead and get. So how do we get it? Well, it says in the upper right, check to acquire, Wisdom Divine 7. Banes will have a check to defeat, boons will have a check to acquire. And if you're familiar with role-playing games, all you have to do is roll against a skill and either equal or exceed that number to be able to acquire or succeed in the check. In this case, it says Wisdom and Divine. Now, luckily, Seela has both Wisdom and Divine. So Wisdom would normally allow Seela to roll a d8, but then her Divine gives her a +2. If I was playing another character that didn't have the Divine trait, I could still roll to acquire this, but I would be rolling based on my Wisdom roll alone, just the d8. So I have the possibility to max out at a 10 right now, which would be a little challenging. So now is where we can look at our hands and see if there's anything we have that we could play to help us with this check. And I think the best thing to go ahead and play is a Blessing of the Gods. The Blessing of the Gods has a couple of different abilities, but most importantly what we want right now is discard this card to add one die to a check. Whenever that happens, you are basically rolling an additional die of what you normally would. So in this case, we would be rolling a d8 and adding 2 to it. In this case, with the Blessing of the Gods, we're going to roll 2 d8s and add 2 to the roll. So we'll go ahead and do that right now and see if we can acquire this Staff of Minor Healing. So we get a 5. We get a 5, that's 10, plus our 2 is 12. So we're going to go ahead and acquire the Staff of Minor Healing. When you acquire something, it goes directly into your hand. So we can now use this whenever we need to. So we have the ability to recharge this card and choose a character at your location to recharge a random card from their discard pile. So that'll be really good when we start building up our discard piles. Now, we have a couple of options here. We can either end our turn and reset our hand, which would go back to the 4 cards, which is what we have right now, which is pretty good. Or we could press on and potentially use a Blessing of the Gods to move further into the location deck. And I think we're going to go ahead and try that. What I mean by that is I can now play my other Blessing of the Gods that says discard this card to explore your location. So both of these are in my discard pile right now. So we're going to go ahead and explore our location one more time. And we get a spell card. Now this looks bad because it's a goblin, but it's actually quite good for us. This is a boon, so it's going to say check to acquire, and it says intelligence, arcane, wisdom, and divine. So again, you look at your character sheet and you see if you have any of those attributes. In our case, we have wisdom and we have the bonus of divine. So we would roll a d8 plus 2, and we would have to roll a 6 or higher to be able to acquire that. Well, unfortunately, we don't have another Blessing of the Gods in our hands to add another die. We do, however, have a standard bearer that says recharge this card to add 1d6 to a non-combat strength or constitution check. Well, unfortunately, this isn't a strength or constitution check, so we can't use that either. And then our half plate is good, but we haven't encountered any monsters yet, so there's really no need to go ahead and do anything with the cards in our hand. So knowing that, we're going to go ahead and roll a d8. We're going to add 2 to it because we have our Wisdom Divine as a capability or as a skill. And we're going to go ahead and try and acquire the Fire Sneeze. We get a 5 plus 2 is 7, which is just enough to go ahead and get us Fire Sneeze. Let's take a look at Fire Sneeze. It says, for your combat check, discard this card to roll your Arcane or Divine die plus a d12 with the Fire trait. So that's really good. It then also says I could discard this card to add a 1d4 with the Fire trait to a combat check using a weapon. So that's even better because my Paladin is going to potentially use spells and use weapons. And then it says if you do not have either the Arcane or the Divine skill, banish this card. Well, I have the Divine skill, so I'm good. So I'm going to go ahead and acquire this, and it comes into my hand, and I now have a hand of 4 cards. Now I don't have anything in my hand that's going to allow me to explore any further, so I have to end my turn right now. At the end of my turn, I then would reset my hand. If I wanted to discard cards, I could. I'm going to go ahead and keep these though. I am at my maximum hand size of 4, so we would move on to our second turn. Alright, for our second turn, the first thing we do is go ahead and flip over the top card of the Blessing deck. We'll get another Blessing of Desna. Now, we're not going to give a card to anyone else. We're not going to move to any other location, but we will go ahead and explore inside the temple. Oh! Wow. Well, this is some of the fun of this game. You never know what's lurking around the corner. So here we are thinking we're safe inside the temple, and all of a sudden Black Fang shows up and is about to wreak havoc. Okay. Now, that's part of the fun of this game. The villain who you're trying to defeat could be in any location, anywhere, at any time. This is going to be challenging because not only do we have to somehow defeat Black Fang, but Black Fang has 2 other areas that he could potentially escape to. Now, the really challenging part is that if we had other players in this game, if other players were at these locations, when we encountered the villain, they could potentially close those locations to stop him from escaping. But because we're on our own here, and we're one paladin with a sword and a shield, and that's not even in our hands, then it's up to us to face Black Fang and drive him back to either the shrine or to the desecrated vault. So, what are we going to do to fight Black Fang? Well, the first thing is, looking at his card, he says before the encounter, each character at this location must succeed at a Constitution or Fortitude 7 check or be dealt 1d4 minus 1 acid damage. Whew, that's pretty nasty. Now this is before we even fight him. Now the good thing, if you remember, is we have a standard bearer in our hand. This says to recharge this card to add a d6 to a non-combat strength or constitution check. So before we encounter him, we have to make this constitution check. So we will add a 1d6, we'll recharge this card, and it will go on the bottom of our deck. And then we have to roll our fortitude or constitution. Well, we picked constitution, so that is a d8. So we're going to roll a d8 and a d6. And we have to get a 7 or be dealt 1d4 minus 1 damage. We rolled a 10, so we're good. We avoided his acid attack, which is really, really well. Now we have to fight him. So our check to defeat him is a combat check of 12. Well, this is where it's a really good thing we got this Fire Sneeze. So Fire Sneeze says for your combat check, discard this card to roll your Arcane or Divine die, which for us is going to be a d8 plus 2, and add a d12 with the Fire trait. So we're going to be able to roll both a d12 and a d8 and add 2 to Fire Sneeze at Black Fang. Unfortunately, our Staff of Minor Healing and our half plate are not going to help us right now. However, the half plate may come in handy. So let's go ahead and roll and see if we can defeat Black Fang with the Fire Sneeze. Survey says we get a 9, and we do not defeat him. Okay, that's really, really bad. So we have to take damage. Now, there's a couple of things we can do here to take damage. Our normal damage would be the check number, which is 12, minus what we rolled, which is 9, which is a difference of 3. So we would take 3 damage, which means we would have to discard 3 cards from our hand. In this case, we only have 2 cards, so we would have to discard both of them. However, we have half plate. And half plate says, banish this card to reduce all damage dealt to you, or if you are proficient with heavy armors, bury it. Additionally, at the top of it, it says recharge this card to reduce combat damage dealt to you by 3. So I think we're going to go ahead and do that. We'll recharge this card, reduce our damage by 3, and basically push with Black Fang and be left with the Staff of Minor Healing in our hands. Now, this is bad news for us because we did not defeat him. He is going to escape. And what's going to happen is we would normally take the total number of locations minus 1, take that many blessings from the box, shuffle those blessings with Black Fang, and place them into the remaining locations. However, because we don't have any locations that are closed, and because we lost to the villain, we actually have to do this from the blessings deck. So we're going to take 2 blessings, because we have 3 locations, minus 1. So we take 2 blessings from the top of the blessing deck. We take Black Fang, and we're going to shuffle these up, and we're going to deal them on top of each of the locations deck. So this means that Black Fang is potentially in the temple, he is potentially in the shrine, and he is potentially in the desecrated vault. Then we take the decks and we shuffle them up as well so that the top card, whether that's the villain or whether that's one of the blessings we just drew, is also shuffled up as well. We're going to do that for each one of these, and then we'll come back and continue our turn. Wow, well, Black Fang came out of nowhere in the temple, smacked us around quite a bit, made us use our armor, and has escaped now. He could be lurking inside the temple, he could be in the shrine, or he could be in the desecrated vault. We're not too sure. However, we're also down to this Staff of Minor Healing as the only card in our hand. There is a good opportunity to use Fire Sneeze again in the future, so I think we should go ahead and do this now. We're going to finish our turn out here, and we're going to play a Staff of Minor Healing, which says recharge this card, choose a character at your location, so we're going to choose ourselves, to recharge 1 random card from their discard pile. So, first thing is we recharge this card, then we take our discard pile, which is 2 Blessings of the Gods and 1 Fire Sneeze. We're hopefully going to get the Fire Sneeze, but we're going to go ahead and shuffle this up, and then we'll take 1 random card from there. That will get recharged and put on the bottom of our deck. Now, we do get to look at our discard pile, and it looks like it was a Blessing of the Gods. Alright, that is the end of our turn, so now we have to reset our hands. We have no cards in our hands, so we have to draw 4 cards, which is our maximum card size. And we will move on to our next turn. Taking a look at our hand, we have a mace, a wood shield, half plate, and a spell called Cure. Alright, let's move on to our next turn. We're going to flip over the top card of the blessing deck, and we get a Blessing of Sarenrae. So, now the question becomes, do we continue to explore inside the temple, or do we move on somewhere else? I think we're still okay, so I think we should go ahead and go with the temple. Let's go ahead and pull this out, and we have a Blessing of Lamashtu. This says Intelligence, Arcane, and Divine. Well, thankfully, we have Divine, so that's going to be a D8 plus 2. So we only have to roll a 5. I don't think there's anything we need to pull from our hand to go ahead and try and do this. Let's go ahead and give it a shot, and we get an 8. So we will go ahead and acquire that card, and it will come into our hand. Now the Blessing of Lamashtu says, discard this card to add a die to a check, bury this card to add 2 dice to a check to defeat a monster. That could be really beneficial. Or discard this card to explore your location. This is some of the things that some people go back and forth with a little bit. Do I use my blessings to push on, or do I use the blessings deck to take turn after turn? This is a really, really beneficial blessing if we were to run into Black Fang again, because it could add 2 dice to our check to defeat a monster, and he does count as a monster. I think we're going to go ahead and hold on to that and keep that here. Cure is a great card to play when we have a large discard pile, so I don't think we're going to have to play that. So the challenge we have now is we have 5 cards in our hand, and if we were to stop at this point, then we have to reset our hand and discard a card. Now, both the wooden shield and the half plate are going to help us in terms of stopping damage. The wooden shield says recharge to reduce combat damage dealt by 2. If you're proficient with light armors, which we are, then you can play another armor on this check. Normally you're only allowed to play 1. You can also, if you've played a two-handed weapon, you may not play this card. Well, we have a one-handed weapon with our mace, so that actually goes pretty well. The plate, as we know before, reduces our combat damage by 3 or can reduce us to nothing. So all of these cards are actually really, really good. I think what we'll go ahead and do though is we'll go ahead and discard the half plate right now, which I know is a little risky, but I like the idea of having a sword and board, or in this case a mace and board, to be able to press on in our next turn. And that would be the end of our turn. So we would move on and go to our next turn. So we're going to go ahead and flip over the top card of the Blessing deck, and that is a Blessing of the Gods. Now we're going to go ahead and explore one more time inside the temple. Oh man! And we get Black Fang! He is back again. This is amazing. He apparently really likes the temple. They must be serving up some dragon beast stuff. So he is a monster, so the potential for using the Blessing of Lamashtu could come into play. We also now have weapons. We have our mace that we could play. For your combat check, reveal this card. So revealing would just mean to show that you have it in your hand. Reveal this card to roll your strength or melee die plus a d8. Additionally, you can discard this card to add another d4. Wow, this could be really, really good. So we do need to defeat him, but the problem is he's still going to have a chance to escape and move on somewhere else. So we're really, really tight on this right now. Now, our strength is a d8, and our melee strength is a +2. So if we were to roll a combat check of 12 against him using the mace, we would be rolling a d8 +2 plus another d8. So basically 2d8 plus 2. We could then discard this card to get another d4 if we wanted to. We could use the Blessing of Lamashtu to add 2 dice to the check as well, so we could roll 4d8. That would be pretty amazing. The problem then is the Blessing of Lamashtu would be in our discard pile, and we would more than likely have to fight Black Fang 1 or 2 more times again. So the question becomes, what do we want to do here? Well, I think, given how many cards we have in our discard pile, it might be a good idea to just use our mace right now. The mace says, for your combat check, reveal the card to roll your strength or melee plus 1d8. So we'll go ahead and reveal that we have the mace. We will go ahead and take our d8, we're going to roll 2 d8s, and we're going to add 2 to it to fight him. However, as before, we have to, before the encounter, have to make a Constitution or Fortitude check of 7 or be dealt 1d4 minus 1 acid damage. Well, unfortunately, we don't have anything here that's going to help us other than the Blessing to add a die to a check to be able to avoid that damage. So the shield may come in handy here. So we look at our Constitution or Fortitude. Our Constitution is a d8. So we're going to roll a d8 and hopefully get a 7 or an 8. Survey says we get a 1. That is called a fumble and usually how well I roll. So now we have to take 1d4 minus 1 acid damage. And in this case, that is 2 minus 1. So we would end up with 1 damage of acid damage, which means we have to discard 1 card from our hand. Well, we're going to need the mace in the fight, we're going to need the Blessing, and we're going to need the cure. So it seems like we should probably use the wooden shield to recharge. It says recharge this card to reduce combat damage dealt to you by 2. If you are proficient with light armors, you may play another armor on this check. We're not going to need to do another armor, but we'll go ahead and recharge that instead of discarding it, so it'll go back into our deck and be able to be found later on in the adventure, or in this case the scenario. Now we're going to fight Black Fang, revealing our mace, and we're going to roll 2d8 plus 2 to try and defeat him. We get 2, that's not good, And 3 is 5, plus 2 more is 7. Wow, we are getting beat up by Black Fang. So that's 5 damage we're going to have to take. And there's really nothing we can do to avoid that. This is really, really bad. So we're going to go ahead and lose all 3 of these cards. Black Fang is going to escape, so we're going to take 2 cards off the top of the blessing deck, and we're going to reset this where we shuffle him up and shuffle him back into these locations. Man, it is not looking good here for Seela to be able to defeat Black Fang on her own. So we'll go ahead and put a card back onto each of these locations. We'll shuffle these up and we'll come back and finish our next turn. Alright, I'll tell you what, this temple is the most dangerous temple I've ever been in. Alright, we have to reset our hands, so we're going to draw 4 cards. We're getting a little dangerously low here, and the fact that our cure ended up in our discard pile is really, really painful. Let's take a look at our hand, see what we have. A short sword, 2 Blessing of the Gods, and Night Watch, which allows us to add a D10 to our perception check or discard to explore our location. Alright, next turn, top card of the Blessing deck is a Blessing of Sarenrae. We're going to go ahead, do we dare just keep exploring this devilishly terrible dungeon or temple? I think we should. Let's go ahead and continue with the temple. We're going to encounter a Blessing of Shaylin. Alright, this says Wisdom 4 or Divine 5. So we're going to go ahead and do our Divine. That is a D8 plus 2. So we're going to have to get a 5. We could go ahead and discard one of our Blessing of the Gods if we wanted to add a die to the check. We could hold on to our Blessing of the Gods to continue to explore inside the temple. Now, let's take a look at the Blessing of Shaylin before we make a decision. It gives us the opportunity to discard to add a die to a check, discard to add 2 dice to a non-combat wisdom check, or discard this card to explore your location. Well, we have a pretty good wisdom. That would almost guarantee us to make any wisdom check we need to. So it would actually be a pretty good card to get in the future. So I say we go ahead and discard one of our Blessing of the Gods to add a die to this check. So we're going to roll 2d8 plus 2 just to make sure we get it. We get a 4, we get a 1, which is 5, plus 2 is 7, so that's more than enough to acquire the Blessing of Shaylin, and it's going to come into our hand, and we'll have access to that later on. Now, I say we keep pushing in this turn and discard the Night Watchman to explore the location again. We're probably going to get Black Fang again. No, we get another Blessing of Lamashtu. That's excellent considering we lost the last one. Now, that gives us an Arcane Divine of 5 check to be able to acquire it. This is where maybe we should have potentially, well, I don't know. What do we do here? Do we use the Blessing of the Gods to ensure we get that, or do we risk not? I say we go ahead and play the Blessing of the Gods, add a D8 to this, and roll 2d8 plus 2 to make sure we get that. We get a 4, we get a 1, a 5 plus 2 is 7, and we go ahead and acquire the Blessing of Lamashtu as well. Now, I don't want to use either of these blessings to push on and explore my location, so I'm going to hold on to them. I'm going to reset my hand and draw another card, which is another Blessing of the Gods, and we're going to go ahead and go to our next turn. On our next turn, we flip over the Blessing of Irori. The Blessing of Irori says, discard this card to add 2 dice to your non-combat intelligence check. So the Blessing of the Gods potentially could copy that, could be good depending on what we find. But we've got a pretty good setup here between our sword, our Lamashtu, and our Blessing of Shaylin. Let's go ahead and push forward and explore inside the temple. And we get a spell called Holy Light. Well, that should be really good for our paladin, I hope. It says, check to acquire Wisdom Divine 8. For your combat check, discard this card to roll your Divine die plus 2d6 with the magic trait. If the check is against a Bane with the Undead trait, instead roll your Divine die plus 2d12 with the magic trait. Well, that's really, really good, especially considering the henchmen that are involved in Black Fang's dungeon scenario are undead ancient skeletons. So we really want to get that. That says Wisdom Divine 8, which means we're going to roll a d8 plus 2. Interesting. All right, Let's talk a little bit about some of the powers. We have not been using the powers of Sela at all because I wanted to kind of show everybody a little bit about some of the basic exploring and checking, defeating monsters, or in our case, not defeating monsters, and acquiring the boons. But let's take a look at Sela's powers. You'll notice that she says you may discard the top card of your deck to add 1d6 to your check. If the top card was a blessing, recharge it instead of discarding it. Now additionally, we could have been examining the top card of our location deck at the start of the turn, and if it's a boon, put it at the bottom of the deck. So, we haven't been doing that. So I suggest from here on forward, now that you've gotten a good idea of where we are, we start to take full advantage of our powers as a paladin. So, I want to make sure we are going to go ahead and get Holy Light. So we're going to go ahead and discard the top card of our deck to add a 1d6 to that. So it's a long sword. Now, if the top card was a blessing, we could have recharged it instead of discarding it, but it's not. So in this case, we have a d8 and a d6 to acquire that Holy Light spell. We're going to add +2 to our roll, and we're going to get 8 + 2 is 10, which is enough to acquire the Holy Light, and that's going to come into our hand. Now, once again, we are at a position where we have 5 cards. We don't want to have to discard things, so let's go ahead and use our Blessing of the Gods to use another exploration and explore inside the temple. And we get a mace. This is also a boon, it's a weapon. We choose to acquire this using a melee skill of 4. Well, our melee is a d8 + 2. So we're going to go ahead and just roll our d8 + 2 because that's pretty good odds. Survey says we get a 7. We'll go ahead and acquire that as well, and that will come into our hand. Now we have a mace and a short sword +2 blessings and the Holy Light. Now the short sword versus the mace are different in terms of bludgeoning and piercing. They have different attributes. When we find these ancient skeletons, the swords are not going to be as valuable as the maces will, because the skeletons are a little bit impervious to piercing and slashing type weapons. So I think if we want to keep our blessings, that's okay. We can discard our short sword and we'll go ahead and end our turn. We're getting close to the end of the temple, which is really good, but it means that we're going to have what we have to move on. More importantly, we're down to only 6 cards in our deck, and if we ever have to draw versus or not being able to draw when we're told to, we're gonna die. So we're having some tough times with this. But now that we've progressed and we've talked about all of our powers, let's start using all of our powers. Well, the very first thing with Sela is it says you may examine the top card of your location deck at the start of your turn. If it's a boon, put it on the bottom of your deck. Let's go ahead and do that real quick with this location. It is a boon. If I want, I can put that on the bottom of the deck. I actually kind of like this, so I'm going to put it back on top of the deck. So we'll leave that there. Then we're going to go ahead and discard the top card of the Blessings deck. And now we're going to explore into the location which we know is the Blessing of Shaylin, which is really nice. So once again, it's a Divine of 5. Our Divine would be a d8 + 2. We could discard the top card of our deck to add a d6, but quite frankly, we're running out of cards here, so we don't want to do that. So let's go ahead and roll our d8. We get a 4 + 2 is 6, which is more than enough to go ahead and get our Blessing of Shaylin. Now, we could use one of our Blessings of Shaylin to move forward in the deck, and I say, why not? Let's go ahead and discard that, and we're going to go ahead and explore, and we get a short bow. The short bow says dexterity and ranged as a check to acquire. Well, our dexterity is only a d4. We don't have the ranged ability. So that means we're going to have to roll a 3 or a 4 on a d4. I don't think it's that important. Paladins don't use bows all that much, so let's go ahead and see what happens. I get a 2. So I don't get that. However, if we were playing in a multiplayer game, and if I had a ranger or someone that wanted to use a bow, they could potentially have discarded maybe a Blessing of the Gods or something like that to be able to add a die to my check. And even though I wouldn't use it, I could then, depending on where they were at locations, trade to them, or at the end of the game, also be able to allow them to have that to build out their deck for a future scenario or future adventure or adventure path. In this case, we didn't acquire it, so this gets banished and it goes back to the box and we're not going to be able to get it. Now, We're down to one card in the temple, which means one of two things. Either that card is a blessing or something good, or that card is Black Fang. We know there's no henchmen in this deck because the henchmen were in the others when Black Fang was in here the first time. So this could be good, this could be bad. We now have 4 cards in our hand. Let's go ahead and end our turn, not discarding anything, not drawing anything back, so we'll keep those 6 cards in our discard or in our deck and move on and see what we get. Now, at the beginning of the turn, you can examine the top card of your location deck. So let's go ahead and look at it and see what it is. It's going to be a Blessing of the Gods. That's really good. So we're going to go ahead and flip over the top card of the Blessings deck, and then we're going to explore inside of the temple. We'll have the Blessing of the Gods. There is no check to acquire this. It says if you encounter this card, you may automatically acquire it. So we're going to go ahead and automatically acquire it. Now that there are no more cards left in this deck, we can now attempt to close the location. When we're closing it, it says you may close this location automatically, and there is no permanent effect when it's closed. So in our case, it closes automatically. It ends our turn because there's really nothing we can do. We can't move in the middle of a turn unless we have a card that says to do that. We are, however, going to have to discard. So at this point, I think the Blessing of the Gods is the good one to go ahead and discard. It's too bad that there's no blessing on top of the deck that would allow us to possibly move to another location, which would be kind of nice, but unfortunately there's nothing we can do in that case. So that will end our turn. We've made it through this dastardly temple, and we fought Black Fang twice, or more importantly, we've lost to Black Fang twice. So now we know Black Fang is hiding in the Shrine of Lamashtu or the Desecrated Vault, and where do we go to try and find him next? Now I know what you're saying. You're probably wondering what happens. We're going to have another video that has the remainder of our critical playthrough on this exact scenario. So don't fret. You will be able to see what happens and if we succeed or if Black Fang comes in and totally destroys us. But as you can tell, there is quite a bit to this game. And we were playing a pretty standard class. Paladin's pretty well known from an RPG perspective. But there are monks, there are shapeshifters, there are sorceresses. There's so many different things in this box. It's amazing. Let's get right down to it. From a component standpoint, this thing is amazing. The card quality is tremendous. The card quantity is tremendous. The artwork is tremendous. And even on top of all that, you've got this massive storage box which holds the cards loose, or as you can see, has slots for your adventure packs as they come out as well. There's so much from a component standpoint. It's almost like a nerdgasm in terms of what somebody would want to be able to store all of this awesome inside of a box. Additionally, we were lucky enough to get some of the playmats that were at Gen Con. These are not needed, but you saw us using them during the gameplay. They're not necessarily a requirement, but they sure are fun. They look real good. Unfortunately, Ultra Pro doesn't have a lot of these. They ran out at Gen Con, and from everything I've seen online, it's probably going to be a couple of months before they become available. They're about the size of a mouse pad. In fact, they are a mouse pad pretty much. But they look great. They do help and just add to the flair of the game as well. So component-wise, from the base set and the character add-on deck, great amount of value, even if you pay full manufacturer retail price, which I believe is $59.99 for the base set and then $19.99 for the character add-on deck. The rule book is tremendous. The rule book is filled with pictures, with suggestions, with different things of what you can do and why you should do it. Very, very straightforward. In our first couple of plays, very few questions that we had, and any questions we had, we could pretty much figure out by looking at the cards. That was one of the things that really jumped out at me. You do not, for as in-depth as this game is, you do not need to keep referring back to this book. I think the first 2 or 3 games we played, what we were referring back to is what happened when we defeated a henchman, what happened when we defeated a villain, and making sure we did all of those processes right. Once you understand those, everything is really on the cards in terms of what can happen and what you should do, and it makes for a great time. Now, let's talk about the mechanics and the gameplay. The gameplay of this is phenomenal. When you start out and you start to realize, I have 15 cards. That's all I have. And I've got to get through this with 15 cards? It's tough. You start to strategize of how best to maximize those cards you have. When you're playing with multiple people, you start to maximize how you can work with them. And like I said before, there's some characters that are going to work really well with each other if you're at the same location, and some that you just want to separate and get away from each other. But it makes for a tremendously fun experience. My first issue with the gameplay was I actually thought that it wasn't going to scale very well. When you first realize that the blessing deck is your timer and you only have 30 blessings in there, whether it's me as solo, me and you playing together as a pair, or me, you, and our friends playing with up to 6 people, I thought to myself, this doesn't seem like it's going to scale very well if there's 6 people and only 30 blessings in that deck. That's going to be really, really tight. It's actually amazingly well designed. Because of all the encounters and all the different things that are going to be happening, and everyone's individual decks of being able to push forward in encounters in their own ways, either through allies or through items or through different cards that they've got in their deck, it scales just tremendously well. I was really surprised about that. So I would love to say that there's a sweet spot for this game, but there really isn't. The sweet spot is really where you are with your group. I have played a couple, maybe 5 or 6 solo games of this already, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We have played 6-player games of this, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've played 2- and 3-player games, thoroughly enjoyed it. I have yet to find a number that feels too much or too little, so I'm really, really pleased with the gameplay mechanics. And again, because 99% of everything you need to know are on the cards, there's really not a lot of referring back to the rule book and very, very straightforward and self-explanatory options as to what you can do or what you should do based on what's in play. So they've done a tremendous job in terms of game design. And when you sit down and play, or as you maybe flip over to our second part of our playthrough video and watch the rest of our scenario, you'll see that it becomes very obvious what some of the things are you need to do based on what the cards are you have in play. It never feels like you're in a position where you have to decide all these different things. It really feels more of a thematic inclusion of, okay, I'm about to go in, how do I want to do this? And it really does, as quite honestly, an inexperienced role-playing gamer, give you a role-playing feel. We just started playing Pathfinder, the role-playing game, earlier this year, so we only have maybe about 6-7 months of role-playing under our belts. But we've enjoyed it, and it's given us that feel that we had when we were learning how to play the Pathfinder role-playing game as well, but in a different environment and in a different setting. So that gets us down to the experience. It's phenomenal. There's just no two ways to cut it. The experience of playing this game, whether solo or with a group, is phenomenal. I can easily see this appealing to non-role-playing gamers who like card games and board games, and deep role-playing gamers who want a different type of fix for characters and for progression of those characters. We didn't get into it in our gameplay too much, but what happens with these character cards is as you go through scenarios, adventures, and adventure paths, you're going to be able to level up your character by adding traits to them. Now, you can check off these actual cards physically. You can put them into a clear sleeve and use a dry erase marker. You can even go on to paizo.com and download character sheets and be able to check off what's in their deck, what their abilities are, and what traits you're going to give them as you go on. But it gives you so much flexibility. Because, for example, while we just played through Sheila as a paladin, and at the end of the scenario we may or may not get a reward, as time goes on, you play more scenarios and more adventures and more adventure paths with that character, you're going to get even more to start that starting deck of yours and change that starting deck of yours. So while I said in the beginning of my play, it's not so much a deck building game in the sense of the gameplay when you sit down to play it, it's really more of a deck evolution game is the easiest way I could describe it, in between games or in between scenarios. And that makes a great experience because you're not just engaged with the great gameplay of what you're doing sitting down and playing the game, but you're engaged with your character and you're engaged with the progression of that character in between games. And it's one of the first games I've seen where I absolutely want to play immediately again and start leveling that character up. This is just a phenomenal experience. You can sit down in a solo and play in an hour. You can sit down in 6 people and play over the course of an evening with a giant adventurer or an adventure path and have a absolute loud, ruckus, laughing, smiling, enjoyable fun time with this. So where does it all lead us? It's a miss. No, I'm kidding. This game is a crit. It is probably one of the best games of the year and will be in contention for best game of the year at the end of the year. There is so much in terms of value, so much in terms of replayability, such a good design, such good gameplay mechanics, and just a massive connection between yourself, the characters, the development, and the stories. Everything is extremely well done. If there's anything that's amiss right now about this game, it's that it's not in your hands. So, this is the Pathfinder adventure card game. This is one of the best games of the years, and this is a crit from Crits Happen. We hope that you enjoyed this critical review. We'd love to hear from you. Do you have this? Have you played it? And what's been happening with your characters? Have you not played it, but you're interested in it? Do you not like role-playing games, and this is suddenly piquing your interest? Let us know. Leave your comments below in the YouTube channel. You can of course join in the discussion on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Google Plus by searching Crits Happen or at our homepage at critshappen.com. But until we see you next time, we hope you enjoy all of your scenarios, all of your adventures, and all of your adventure paths inside the Pathfinder adventure card game. Thanks so much for watching. Keep rolling those dice, and we hope they're all crits.